What's up, everybody? And we are back. Chris, the time has finally come, man. We are getting a chance to sit down with Bruce Horak from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and we are incredibly excited and delighted to welcome Bruce to the podcast. Now, some of you obviously know him as Hemmer from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, but he's also a painter, an artist, and does quite a lot of great stuff. We can't wait to talk to him. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us here on the Random Redshirt podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So first and foremost, when we look at Star Trek Strange New Worlds, what was the casting process like for you in particular?
Well, it was all done over Zoom. It was right in the very depths of all the lockdowns and things. So I was at home and set up a camera in my kitchen and did the scene where Uhura and Hemmer meet a couple of times over the old Zoom platform, and then a couple of more auditions over Zoom with other folks, kind of moving up the chain of command, if you will. And it was really exciting. The casting call went out. They were looking for a blind or visually impaired performer to play a blind alien on a new Star Trek, and that's pretty much as much as I knew, and that he was an Enar. So I dug into some Memory Alpha stuff and went and rewatched the episodes of Enterprise to see what I could learn, and just kind of went from there. Had no idea really what Hemmer was going to look like, other than an Enar. So I thought, okay, he's antenna and probably pale. That's as much as I knew.
That's so great to hear that you did your research on the Enar and looked it up on Memory Alpha and Enterprise. That's great.
Well, I think the resources that are out there are pretty extraordinary, actually. So as an actor, it was it's a real boon to have all of that stuff.
Now, Bruce, when Chris and I were doing some research and putting together our notes for this episode with you, one of the questions that really came to my mind was, before you got cast as Hemmer, were you a Star Trek fan or sci-fi fan? And if so, was that intimidating to step into a character into this vast Star Trek universe that's been established for 50, 55 plus years?
Oh yeah. The intimidation factor is high. I grew up on Star Trek and am a huge fan of the whole franchise. Really, I just love it. Total sci-fi nerd. I read I had photo novels of the original series, and I think I had like one of those read-along books, turn the page when you hear the phaser sound kind of thing. Huge fan. My dad was a comic book collector and a sci-fi nerd himself, so we went to a few comic book conventions in the basement of community halls when I was a kid, and saw them evolve from basement of community halls to full convention halls and centers and things. It's just it's extraordinary to watch the expansion of that world, and then just to be able to step into the community that is Star Trek. I mean, right from the moment that it was officially announced, the messages of support and encouragement and welcome they've just blown me away. I'm thrilled.
I will say, Bruce, that there has not been a person that I've met so far or talked to, family or friends or otherwise, who doesn't love Hemmer as much as we do. And in fact, I have several friends and family who watch Star Trek who say Hemmer is my favorite character on Strange New Worlds. So hopefully that brings you a bit of joy and validation, because we love Hemmer, we loved Hemmer, and we hope that based on some of the interviews that we have seen and articles we've read, that it's not the last time we will probably see Hemmer, at least on the show, even though as far as timeline goes. And we hope we get to see not only more of Hemmer, but we hopefully get to see more of you and maybe some different roles in Star Trek.
Well, all I can say is that the Star Trek career of Bruce Horak is not over. That's as much as I am allowed to say. It's incredible, really, the response that Hemmer has had. And from the very first moment, or from the very first audition, I was told that Hemmer was going to be he's going to be built up as a bit of a fan favorite. They wanted to, build a mentor figure in for Uhura, and to have him go out in a noble and heroic way. And I think that their goal was entirely met, and I'm absolutely thrilled that it's landed the way that it has.
Yeah, I would say that goal absolutely was met, and it came across like beautifully. Hemmer had so much presence that I think that you brought, and we thank you for that. And was there, thinking about, and it's so beautiful to hear that you're a Star Trek fan and a sci-fi fan, and you grew up with that. So like in thinking about those things, like, and when you came to the role of Hemmer, did you have inspiration that you drew upon for Hemmer, or did you incorporate some of your own personality or philosophies?
In terms of inspiration for the figure, tried to kind of go into high status figures that I'm familiar with. I saw him as being very, yeah, very sure, very confident of himself. As that kind of engineer was, if there was anyone specific, I can't think of who it would have been, but yeah, just a stiffness and a physical stiffness to him that I'm not particular. It's not really like me at all. I'm a bit more of a Gumby, if you will. More Gumby than Pokey, I guess, if we were really to if we're really to dig into some tropes there. But yeah, it's he's that sort of confident, arrogant character that is always fun to play.
Mhm.
Think of a stiff back and rigid shoulders, and kind of move from there. There's your hammer.
Well, I think it came across great. I did like, Hemmer being Enar and everything, and they're not a species, I should say a subspecies of Andorian compared to their counterparts. They're not ones that are about war and fighting and everything. And it definitely came across that way with Hemmer, that he had that sometimes quiet confidence, sometimes it was not quiet, but he you could tell he knew his stuff.
Mm,
And I think he was a great mentor for Uhura, because I think Uhura, to some extent, had some confidence issues at first when she first came aboard, because here she is, this cadet, right? And she's on the bridge of the Enterprise and she's dealing with all this. And then you kind of see her kind of attached to Hemmer a little bit and gain some knowledge from him, and some of the wisdom that I know Chris and I really enjoyed most in Strange New Worlds came from Hemmer and his ability to kind of take Uhura under his wings.
mm. Yeah, I really dug the pacifist angle that they put. The scene where he and Uhura are trapped in the cargo bay, and he talks about his sort of modus operandi of being a pacifist, and what that actually means, and how it's active, and it's as the engineer, and being the one who's driving the engines that move the Enterprise. I think it's interesting to have a pacifist at that wheel, at that helm. He Yeah, I think that's such an interesting and important part of what you know the Enterprise is kind of moving with, and what the morals of Starfleet that he was able to articulate, which I'm doing such a great job of right now as I stumble over my words.
No, we get it. Now this is a little bit more of a superficial question. I know we always joke in the podcast that Chris likes to pose and talk about very deep philosophical stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but did you see the phaser that guy had? So it's a bit of a yin and a yang for us. I guess it
Right,
definitely works. But
right,
one of the questions I had, because obviously, you don't look like you on the show. You look like an Enar. And so my
right.
question was,
Mm.
what was the makeup and the prosthetic like timeline? I mean, it looks like it had to have taken a good like 3 to 4 hours of makeup every single time.
Yeah, it was 3.5 hours to get all the prosthetics glued on and then painted before I even went to costumes. And then at the end of the day, it was a full hour to get out. They would have to basically peel 15 separate pieces of prosthetic off my face, and then scrub the paint that was used. So yeah, every day that I was in, that was the process. Yeah.
So they scrubbed and you lost a few layers of your own skin at the same time, I guess.
That's how I look so young.
That's right. It removed any age lines at all that you might have had.
That's right. That's right.
So, okay, I'm going to ask you a bit of a cliche question, and I only ask this because, or I always say that because at conventions, you know, you always get actors who are like, "Oh, they asked me what my favorite episode is, and I don't know because I have all these episodes." But Strange New World only has 10 episodes so far. Was there a specific episode that you can think of that was your favorite quote unquote Hemmer episode?
Favorite Hammer episode? Yeah, I think I have to go with 109. Um,
Mm.
the getting to flip the Vulcan salute is high on the bucket list of things to do on Star Trek. Um, Getting to sacrifice myself, and it was also, I mean, this is maybe telling tales out of school, but we did a couple of days of stunts, and they had me hooked up into a wire apparatus and flown like 3 stories into the ceiling. So because of the shot of him falling out of the back of the ship, they were actually going to have, kind of me falling away. And getting to do that, getting rigged up in a harness and flown is that was the coolest thing. It really was. I mean, the first time I went up, I think I may have had to change my pants afterward.
I was going to ask if you had peed yourself or something.
Oh, it's I mean, those stunt guys make it look so easy. So they really do. But yeah, I got a couple of days of doing wire work, and unfortunately that didn't make it into the show because I would have loved to have seen it what they had done with it. But yeah, that was just so cool, and it's a horror episode, and I was had a big watching of horror films when I was in my 20s. I was a bit of a fan of that stuff. So getting to actually do, Alien basically was awesome.
Yeah, that episode had very much an Aliens versus Predator kind of feel to it, and especially when you think about it too, Bruce, because that episode obviously is based around an iconic Star Trek villain in the Gorn,
Yeah.
and so that was very interesting. The way they played that. I'll be honest with you, I was shocked when they got to the part where they said, "Oh, the venom isn't just for hurting its prey; it's actually to implant babies into their host or whatever."
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking to myself, "Oh no, does that mean Hemmer has it? And like, what's going to happen?" And then when it started going down that road, I'm like, "They're not seriously going to kill him off, are they? They can't. They can't kill Hemmer off." And then they did. So.
Great. Well, it's so funny because in a way, like the storytelling is so good that people were shocked and people were, I mean, leave them wanting more, I guess. And I kind of, it's a bit of cold comfort there, but it is that good and that it had the response. I think the worst thing would be for people to go either good, glad he's gone, or saw it coming a mile away, or also whatever, who cares, move on. And just to be forgotten in that way, and that he's had that kind of effect. I mean, it's a real testament to the creators of the show and to the writers that they have managed to create a character that's got that kind of an impression, and then to get the exit that is left, yeah, has left a bit of a grief hole. And watching the beautiful funeral service after that scene, which I was not a part of, but I do remember, just because we shot everything out of order, well, as you do on these shows, I came from my trailer and was sitting kind of off camera as we were preparing to shoot something else, and the rest of the cast had just finished shooting the funeral scene, and just the way that they were kind of all shaken up and had obviously gone through something. I'm like, oh, I think this is going to be a really special episode. And honestly, when I first time I read the script, I kind of cheered because I saw that Hemmer was going to have a hero's death, and then I anxiously chewed my fingernails until I got to watch the thing to see how it was all going to come out. And um, as a storyteller, as a creator, a writer myself, when the episode was done, I just kind of leaned back and went, "Good, like that was really satisfying," and I'm so happy with how it all turned out.
that's really wonderful. That is really beautiful. One of the things that I appreciated about this, Bruce, was not only the episode was beautiful and the series was beautiful, but um, you came into the show. Now you're part of the Star Trek family forever, which I think is great. But it also allowed us to learn about you. And now that you're part of the Star Trek family forever, I think, and because of the powerfulness of that episode that you talked to, I think you'll be like a role model for a lot of different other artists and creators and actors as well. And I think that's great for them to be able to watch you. And they've got much more awareness, and I have much more awareness now. So I'm just thinking, have you? You're part of the Star Trek family, forever, but you've got all these other parts and aspects of your life as a creator and an artist. And I think you're also a role model too. This more awareness that's going to be given to you. Have you thought about the effect and kind of the positive effects that this will have on some of your endeavors?
Oh yeah, it's and I've already seen the effect that it's had as folks have been reaching out to me, who have been inspired by the character and also by my own path as a disabled artist, and that has been. It's funny. My mom tells a hilarious story about when I was in grade 3. I saw my very first play. A theater company came to my elementary school and did a performance of a show for kids in our gymnasium, and they transformed the gymnasium into a theater and did this great show, which I remember the title, Zeke and the Indoor Plants. They gave us a pencil at the end, and I was really I came home after the performance and I was totally jazzed about what I had just witnessed in this show. And they put on a play in our gym, and there was music, and it was amazing, and I related the whole story. And at that age, apparently, I said to my mom, "I'm like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna write shows about people like me, disabled kids." And that was really the trajectory for, and has been the trajectory since since even now, is was telling stories and putting on shows, and putting out characters and stories that we don't necessarily see all the time. Um, and that's really something that has resonated all the way through my career, and getting responses from artists who are blocked in some way. Either they feel blocked by their own physical abilities, or perhaps it's they feel blocked by the marketplace, and how there isn't room for them. There isn't a place for a disabled voice, or they feel blocked just getting up in the morning, and they've got a million other things to do, and they can't find the time for it. And the blocked creatives that have that I've worked with and that I have encountered, and certainly for myself, when I get blocked, I need that inspiration. I need to look around and find someone that I connect with and see how they're doing it, and what skills are they using, or what forces are they using to move through a creative life. And honestly, the conversations that have happened as a result of Star Trek have just been extraordinary. And I feel really, like, deeply, deeply honored, because up until Star Trek, my reach or grasp was limited to the people that I encountered face to face in my public performances. And Star Trek has put my face and my story and my desire to connect with other creatives on a global level. I'm chatted with someone from Scotland this morning, and someone from New Zealand last week, and chatting with a medical practitioner in Brazil who's doing research on retinoblastoma, which is the cancer that I had. So I feel really, really quite lucky that Star Trek has afforded that. It's opened a lot of doors for me as a creative practitioner.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you, and such a tremendous positive impact.
Yeah, that's really inspiring, Bruce. And I will tell you this. So my daughter was born legally blind in one of her eyes, and she has glasses and stuff like that, and she sees pretty well.
Yeah.
But she also wants to be an actress,
Yes.
and she is everything, like, wants to perform and do all this stuff. And we're gonna enroll her into some theater classes in the summer, next summer, I think, and get her going. But she really wants to do it. So I will tell you that I think you're an inspiration to my daughter because she has a little bit of that, but still, has a similar drive that you did, where you want to do that. You want to get out there and you want to perform, and so it's definitely inspiring. So we appreciate that.
Oh, it's just I think it's so important. And growing up, there weren't a lot of visually impaired or legally blind actors that I could look to, as role models, or you it's just one of those things about being an artist, is you look for someone who's doing what you want to do and you emulate them, and there wasn't a lot of that out there. And then I discovered Peter Falk. I wish I'd discovered him a little bit earlier, but I read his story, and that he'd had retinoblastoma, and the trials and tribulations of being a one-eyed actor, visually impaired actor. Yeah, and when I read his story for the first time, I got a real boost of encouragement. And I think that if I can provide nothing else, I think just a little encouragement for those who are feeling blocked, or are feeling, perhaps that the doors are closed out there. It's just sometimes you just got to keep banging on them, and eventually they'll open up.
Well, we're glad that you banged on the Star Trek door, Bruce, because you brought us Hemmer, and we know you're going to continue to bring us many more amazing things, both in your personal life as well as in the Star Trek universe. And so we really look forward. I know you can't talk about it, but we really look forward to seeing you again, hopefully very soon on the screen, in a role in some capacity in Star Trek.
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait.
We can't either. Um, you know, uh, uh, as we looked at Strange New Worlds, when you were going through the filming process for the show,
Mhm.
and you guys were doing episodes and you're reading the scripts and so forth, um, were there things like, obviously you were a Star Trek fan growing up, and sci-fi and comic books and stuff like that. Were there things in the script, or when you guys were filming stuff, like, when somebody watches a movie or a TV series and you spot what they call Easter eggs, right? Like, oh, that little thing back there, this thing in the scene, that totally looks like something from
Uh,
this series or whatever. Were
right.
there things that stood out to you during the filming process where you're like, oh my gosh, that's a identical to TOS, or this comes from Enterprise, and so forth?
Ooh, yeah, it was. Well, certainly the introduction of the Gorn. I mean, I think we all squealed when we read that. It was pretty great. But for myself as an actor, I did have a few of those bucket list moments of, I got to play with the transporter. I got to do, bringing on the little chunk of the planet's core, and actually getting to play with that stuff was. I mean, every set that I walked into, I was just fully geeking out over all the incredible details, standing on the transporter pad. And it was funny, the very last thing that I shot was the arrival of Hammer on the Enterprise when he beams in at the end of episode 1. And that was not in the script that I had read. I mean, they let me read episode 1 just so I had some context of it, but Hammer didn't appear in the original script of that. And it was literally the last day. I think we were actually doing some media stuff, and they just sort of shuffled me into the transporter room and said, "Okay, we're gonna beam you in at the end of episode 1, just a little tag on." I mean, I got so excited about that because there was another thing that, like, on the bucket list of I got to beam in. I got to stand on the bridge at some point. And when I got to pick up the communicator in episode 108 and play with that, I mean, and it was fully the replica of the original series communicator. Just flipping that thing open, I felt like a kid. It was so
So when you were cast as Hemmer,
yes.
and you got the script and everything like that, at what point during the process were you told, if at all, that Hemmer was going to die? Like, was it early on in the process, or was it kind of a surprise later on? Like, when did you know that your character was going to die in season 1?
Oh, I knew it when during the audition process. Henry Alonso Myers, I think, was in on my last audition, and we talked about Hemmer and the role of Hemmer and how he was not going to make it. And he flat out expressed from the very start, he's like, "This is a really hard thing," because all the writers had fallen in love with him.
Mm.
By the time I think they had finally broken the stories open, they'd realized, oh, we really like this character, and it's going to be so hard, which is also, I think, pretty great that they were willing to risk that, that they were um, willing to let go of that character. So yeah, it was very early on. I purposely didn't talk about it with any of the other cast until we had read that episode, and I think we only read episode 109 maybe a week before we started shooting it. So all that time, I think most of the cast had no idea that it was coming. And yeah, again, like reading it, all I knew up until a week before we started shooting it was that he was going to go, and I had my fingers and toes crossed that it was going to be cool. I didn't want Hammer to go as like pushing a button and thinking, what's this do, and blows himself up. I wanted him to have an impact. I was really hopeful that it would be just be cool. Let's please be cool. And then I read it and thought, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I would definitely say it was cool. Obviously, we didn't want it to happen, but it very much was cool. I mean, the idea that you die the same way they do in the Alien movies is kind of is that's if you're a sci-fi nerd like we all are, then obviously that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
It was definitely heroic and noble, like you say. Yeah, and impactful. Wonderful, wonderful. So like you have so many like creative endeavors, like as we learned about you, that's going on. Just thinking parallel to your work with Star Trek, and then what you have going on in your life. I learned it's pretty awesome that you play piano. You're a musician, a composer. Which I thought was incredible. But I know you've got a lot of other projects that you're doing parallel too. If you don't mind sharing that with us, um, that would be wonderful, and how that's been and what your experiences have been.
Sure. Well, I started out my career in theater as an actor and as a writer and a musician and composer. And then I got out of theater school. Um, I got into improvisation as well from Calgary, Alberta, which is the home of Loose Moose Theater. And the artistic director there is a man named Keith Johnstone, who invented theater sports and wrote a kind of seminal book on improv called Impro. So I trained with him for a number of years, and then I moved to Toronto, Ontario, and trained in clowning. So that was
Wow.
basically my background. I developed a bunch of shows with some friends, and have toured all over Canada with our various theatrical productions. And then in about 2011, a friend of mine saw me on stage, a fellow I'd known for years and years, who had no idea that I'm legally blind. He knew that I had some vision problems, knew that I couldn't drive, but didn't know the extent of my visual disability. So he asked me how I see, and I said, "Well, why don't I sit down and paint your portrait?" So I got some paint out, and what what began as a friendly chat and a portrait sitting turned into another career for me, as over the course of that first year I painted 365 portraits and sat with folks from all across the country and tried to interpret the way that I see. And that project has continued to this day. I've moved it online now, so I sit with people over Zoom and do a 45-minute chat interview and sketching session, and then I go off and I work from the sketches and from the audio recording that I've taken of the Zoom session and turn it into another portrait. So I'm getting close to having done 1,000 of them now, which
Wow.
kind of, that's the first goal. I'm sure the goalposts will move as I get to portrait number 998 or something like that. I'm having too much fun. But yeah, I get to sit with people all over the world now, and folks find me on my website, brucehorak.com, and they book a portrait sitting and get to hang out for an hour and then mark the time with a piece of art, which is pretty spectacular. Continuing in the visual art, so I paint landscape paintings, and I have a Patreon account, a Patreon page, and people that subscribe to that get an original hand painted card from me every month. So it's a little greeting card that I'll paint, and I enjoy doing that. I spend a couple of hours every day just sketching and painting, and then send them out to my patrons, which is awesome fun. Continuing to compose and write music here at the studio where I am, and I actually just finished recording the voice of the Scarecrow in an upcoming audiobook production of The Wizard of Oz, which is going to be put out. They're going to start a Kickstarter campaign in September, and it's a company that does described books for blind and visually impaired children. So The Wizard of Oz has all these really wonderful illustrations in it. I think John R. Neal might have been the original illustrator. Really wonderful stuff. And there hasn't been an audio book of The Wizard of Oz that actually has descriptions of the illustrations. So this company, and I'm blanking on the name of them now. I think it's called Described Audiobooks, maybe. They did a Winnie the Pooh was their first one last year, and they also what's also really interesting about this particular audiobook is that everyone who's doing the voices and I think even the engineer are all blind or visually impaired performers. So that's coming out this year, and also just continuing to create live theatrical productions. I've got a production of Goblin Macbeth with my creative partner Rebecca Northam, which we premiered in Calgary in March, and we're doing a remount of it in September, October in Calgary, Alberta, where three goblins discover the complete works of William Shakespeare and decide to try theater for the first time. We have these absolutely dynamite silicon masks from a company in the States called Composite Effects, and I think they do some of the prosthetic or silicon mask work for like Game of Thrones. I mean, it's that style, that kind of heightened, amazing stuff. So these three goblins have a grand old time doing some Shakespeare. And then I'm also, I know this is my resume, but in February of 2023, I will be touring Manitoba in Canada, the beautiful province of Manitoba in February, which promises to be cold. I have a one-person show called Assassinating Thompson, where I paint a portrait of the entire audience while I tell the story of becoming one of Canada's only legally blind visual artists. And I solve the mystery of who killed Tom Thompson, who was a iconic Canadian painter who died under mysterious circumstances in 1917. Following the performance, I auction off the painting to the highest bidder, and we donate the proceeds to a local charity. That's my year.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's you're not doing much, are you, Bruce?
Well, I jokingly say
Wow.
that it's I do anything to keep from getting a real job.
Well, you got that's a lot of fantastic work. It certainly sounds, fun to go see. And for those of you listening, be sure to go check out, his website. I have been to your website, Bruce. I will say, your artwork on there is exquisite. I think it's fantastic. And the idea of getting like a hand-drawn, hand-painted card every month is very enticing. That sounds like a lot of fun.
You know what? If my mother asks, I'm having a great time.
So, one of the questions that I was thinking through as we were kind of building our notes for this episode
Yes.
is if Hemmer had not died in season one, this is a little bit of a hypothetical here,
Great.
and he continued on in the series, alive and everything. Where do you think he ends up? I mean, obviously, we know at some point down the road when Pike is not captain of the Enterprise anymore, and it's Kirk, and you get Scotty and stuff. Scotty's going to be the chief engineer. We all know that. But leading up to that point, does Hemmer stay on board the Enterprise? Does he leave? I mean, an Enar is not the most common species to see on board a Starfleet vessel. So, I was curious on your take. Where do you think Hemmer would have ended up had his storyline continued?
Oh, that is a great question. I love digging into this stuff because you can start to see some of the arc of it. I think the thing that had to be challenged for me is Hemmer and his pacifism. So at some point, is he forced to kill? At some point, is he forced to do violence? And what kind of situation is going to lead to that? Because when you have a character with a strong ethical stance on something, the obvious thing is to challenge that stance and to put them in a situation where either they have to, die without breaking their code, or are they going to break the code, and then what are the ramifications of that? I think that would have been a really interesting long arc for him. even the fallout of it afterwards, I think would be fascinating. Where he ends up physically, I don't know. Uh, yeah, beyond being the chief engineer of the Enterprise, then what's the step up from that? I wonder.
Yeah, I always thought like if he had continued on, right, and he's the engineer on the Enterprise and stuff, he decides, I based on all these missions we've gone on and stuff, and there's so much, bloodshed and everything else, and he ends up going back to Andoria and goes back and lives with his people in the ice cave mountain area that they're from. I
Yeah,
always thought that is a possibility. Maybe he goes back to his roots if he decides that, you know what, Starfleet just isn't for me anymore.
yeah, yeah. I could see that. I absolutely could see, what it would drive him to. But also the question of what is wiping out the Enar race. I mean, they say, at least on Memory Alpha, something like there's only 1,000 of them left at this point. So is there do they just kind of dwindle out, or is there some cataclysmic event that wipes out the final, few hundred? Um, but that's all lovely speculation, and maybe there's that gets resolved in season 7 of Strange New Worlds.
You know what? I hope it gets. I mean, Star Trek Picard's only getting 3 seasons, and I hope that that Strange New Worlds gets more than 3 seasons because the show is just so good. And in today's streaming media, world we live in, it seems like streaming shows now, like Strange New Worlds or Discovery, Picard, and stuff like that, that live on a streaming service versus the cable television. Their seasons aren't like the classic Trek series where they're getting 20 some episodes. Now it's like 10, 12 episodes, and that's it
Yeah.
per season. So I know Chris and I were talking about this because to me, and this isn't meant to be a dig at any of the other series, but to me, Strange New Worlds was the show that I think modern Star Trek needed. It goes back to the roots of Star Trek, in my opinion, and we've said this several times to each other that we can't get enough of Strange New Worlds, and I hope that based on the storyline with Pike and what's going to happen to him down the road, that we get 5, 6, 7 seasons because with only 10 episodes a season, I don't see any reason they couldn't go that long.
Yeah.
Plus, by going that many seasons, we might have a chance to get some more Bruce in our lives in Strange New Worlds in different roles.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a win-win for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
So, in a little over a week, we're gonna, I'm headed to the Las Vegas Star Trek convention, and I know 5 of your castmates are going to be there, and I'm wondering why the heck Creation hasn't gotten you there yet.
Fine.
I don't understand that. So I have sent an email to them saying that they need to get you there. I don't know if that's going to happen, but in your mind, what would it be like going to your first Star Trek convention from a different side, from being a member of a cast and being a part of that?
I would love that. I mean, I've been dreaming of Vegas since I first heard about it. Yes, what an incredible thing that would be. We got a little taste of that world when I got invited down to the New York premiere, which was a huge thrill. And that moment where I walked out of the hotel and there was a lineup of people who not only recognized me but had stacks of Hammer pictures to be autographed. My head just started spinning. I'm like, what is this world? And then driving up to the movie theater, and there were people in costumes lining up around the block, and what a absolute thrill to just to experience all that, and just the outpouring of love for the series and love for the franchise. It's really wonderful, and then I get to just on the other be a part of that and geek out on on it as well, and talk about and learn about all of the many facets of what the world of Star Trek has to offer. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm certain that the convention circuit will eventually happen for me. It's just I guess a matter of time.
Oh, it's going to happen. I can almost guarantee it because there will be an outpouring of hate mail if they do not get you to the convention, because we all need some Hammer at the Las Vegas Star Trek convention.
Agreed.
That is for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's absolutely going to happen. Absolutely going to happen. Since since we are talking about like a little bit from a fan perspective, and I'm just curious, and we know yet you're a great Star Trek fan, sci-fi fan too. I'm curious, Bruce, like in you when you grew up, did you have a, out of the Star Trek series, not including Star Trek Strange New Worlds?
Hmm.
I know in Zach's mind, like you can only give one answer, but I'm curious, did you have a, out of the Star Trek series, is there one that is close to your heart that you have a favorite?
Of the series, is this?
Yes, yes.
Well, because the original series was my introduction to it, that's certainly, that's the bedrock on which all the others are based. Um, I really have a real fondness for Enterprise, and the reason is, of course, that I just enjoyed the show. I was a huge Scott Bakula fan from Quantum Leap days, and when it was the time when I had watched it, I just happened to be at a really formative period in my life, and that show was just, it was like the background music at the restaurant, and every time I hear it, not the not to disparage it, but I do skip the theme song. But yeah, there's just something about the stories in that show and the relationships on it that, yeah, I'm very very fond of it. But honestly, every series I love for a different reason. Um, yeah, it's so hard to play favorites, but and of course I have to disqualify Strange New Worlds because I'm on it.
Nice, nice.
Well, without Chris trying to run me over with the bus here, what he my favorite series of all time is going to be D Space Nine. Although Strange New Worlds is creeping up, let me tell you what.
Oh, great.
But yeah, I am kind of the same way though. I mean, I have my favorite series, but I love each of the series, but they're really all for different reasons. I mean, I think Star Trek is great in that regard, and it going back to what you mentioned earlier in our chat. You mentioned about uh, uh, inclusivity and things like that, and breaking down barriers and stuff. And I think when you're talking about a blind character in Hemmer, Star Trek has always been about that idea of like diversity and representation, and Gene Roddenberry saying that we really are all stronger together than we are
Mm,
separate, and that it's the differences that we have with each other that is what makes things great. That we can all come together and have different ideas and different thoughts and different perspectives, and that's what makes things great versus everybody being exactly the same.
definitely, definitely.
Well, Bruce, we really do appreciate this. This has been an absolute treat for us. We have been more than honored to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
this is the we could not have asked for a better opportunity to talk with you, to learn more about you and your work. And obviously, just to kind of gush on you a little bit about Hemmer and your role. And like Chris said, you are now part of the Star Trek universe, the Star Trek family that'll
Awesome.
never go away.
Awesome.
And we hope that we get to see more of you going forward, which sounds like we may, which is great. And we hope that down the road, if when we see Hemmer again, or we see you in other roles, we hope to have you back on here to chat more about that and to find out what you're up to at that point in your life.
Love it. Well, and please keep the letter writing campaign going because I would love to go to Vegas.
100%, Bruce. 100%. We really really hope that you're able to get there. We know you will get there. It's just a matter of when.
That's right.
And even if it's not just Vegas, we hope that it's Vegas and some of the other locations as well.
Awesome.
Because I can guarantee you there are lots of people out there that want to see Hemmer and meet you and talk with you and hear your perspective, just like our listeners are getting a chance to hear now. So yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your really busy schedule to chat with us, to share with us. This has been an absolute honor for us.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to all those who are listening. If you have been listening, be sure to check out Bruce's website. And he's got a lot of great information on there, his paintings. Like you said, he's got a Patreon on there. Be sure to go out and give him some love, show him some support, and let him know what you think of his work as well as his role on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So thanks again, as always, everybody, for listening. Chris, as always, this has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Pleasure.
And as always, everybody, we thank you again, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Red Shirt Podcast.